Who wins the matchup between Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert on this Sunday? That and much, much more coming up on tonight's episode of the Football Guys Mailbag Show. And Troy, this is what I want to start with. We got a question in from Twitter at Hills Have Pies saying, who wins the matchup? We got Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert, the number 1 and number 2 scorer in fantasy football last week, facing off against each other this Sunday. Who do you think scores more points in this matchup?
This is a very unfair question, I just have to say. But if I had to choose one, I'm going to go Herbert. I love Lamar Jackson, but I got to be objective here. I'm going Herbert. I don't know how much rushing production he's going to do, but he doesn't need it, right? He's been throwing for multiple touchdowns for weeks now. And again, he just has the better weapons overall, right? Lamar Jackson, he's his own weapon. But yeah, I know he has Mark Andrews and he has Hollywood Brown, and hopefully, Rashad Bateman comes back. Herbert, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen. So it's slight. It's very, very close, but
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing right now is everybody was fading Justin Herbert in the offseason because he didn't have that rushing upside. Well, right now, Justin Herbert's killing it. Tom Brady's killing it. I mean, it certainly helps to have a quarterback that can rush the ball, but when you're throwing 13 touchdowns in 5 games, it doesn't matter how much you're running the ball, and that's what Herbert's doing. So he's balling out right now, but I'm going to take the other stance here, and I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson because of that rushing upside. I mean, the knock on him is that he isn't a great thrower, but we just saw him light it up on Monday night in what, might go down as the best game of the 2021 season. That game was just phenomenal to watch. It was such a fun comeback. But really, I'm going to go with Lamar Jackson here. And like you said, it's an unfair question because both of these guys are young. They're balling out. If you got them on your fantasy team, you're having a lot of fun with both of them. But like you said, Lamar Jackson is a weapon in himself. And we didn't even see him rushing all that much on Monday night. So I think, there's some really good defenders on this Chargers team. And I think that, that could be difficult for him. But Lamar Jackson is just in a league of his own when it comes to being an effortless runner. If there's anybody that can run against this Chargers team, it's going to be Lamar Jackson. So it's a tough question, but I am siding with Lamar on this one. Anyway, want to thank everybody that is tuning into this show today. We are now streaming to the Football Guys Twitter page, so you can catch us there, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, all of that fun stuff. Reminder that you can send any of your questions into mailbag@footballguys.com. So Troy and Victoria and myself can go over those. Victoria is not with us tonight, but she will be back with us next weekend. We bring the show to you every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll start off with all of these submitted questions per usual, and then we will go to the chat. So if you've got any questions that you weren't able to submit to us, drop them in the chat. We'll get to them at the end of the show. Also, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube page at youtube.com/footballguystv to see this show, the Audible, DFS Power Grid, and everything else that the Football Guys team has to offer.
Perfect. And guys, if you love fantasy football, then listen up. You have to join this NFL season's hottest and easiest daily contest. You can flex on the competition in FanUp's daily flex ball contest to win cash and the hottest brand prizes. It combines the best of redraft and best ball formats. There's no salary cap, drafts, waivers, or anything like that. FanUp allows you to pick a new team daily and stack your roster however you like. You can take on your friends every week, so sign up right now. Enter before Thursday Night Football, Sunday games, and Monday Night Football each week to win FanUp bonus prizes from Fanatics. Download the FanUp app now in Apple App Store, or just go to fanup.app. Just be fans.
Yeah, shout out Fanatics, by the way. I'm going to the Bears game this weekend, and I just got a package in on Tuesday with a fresh hat, fresh T-shirt. I'll be out there ready to go, bear down. But anyway, let's jump into it. We got so many great questions today. And this one that we've got in from Taco Kellen. First of all, Taco, thank you for submitting questions almost every single week. We appreciate it. And, the big talking point from Monday night's game was Lamar Jackson and the comeback. But something that really kind of caught my eye was how good Marlon Mack looked. I mean, he's coming off this Achilles injury, which used to just be a death sentence for running backs. And he looked juiced up. He was running hard. And, much to the dismay of Jonathan Taylor managers, Marlon Mack looks pretty darn good right now, and he's on the trade market. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is injured, and there have been some talks about, some rumors that they might be interested in Marlon Mack, and that's a question Taco has for us today. What is Marlon Mack's value if he is traded to the Chiefs? What do you think, Troy?
I think his ceiling is probably I'll say not his ceiling. I'll say he will be probably a mid-level RB2 because here's the thing, right? So CEH, he wasn't getting a lot of targets, but he was very efficient at running the ball, right? At one point, at one point in the season, he was top 10 in rushing attempts and rushing yards. I don't think Marlon Mack is going to step into that role and be what CEH was. And I don't think he's going to step into that role and get a bunch of targets. But I think he will get enough opportunities to, again, be a mid range RB2, which is fine. I just don't get too crazy in terms of your expectations if that does happen. But I also think that he'll be splitting work with guys like, Darrell Williams and Jerick McKinnon. So as exciting as it would be, I would temper expectations. Again, we want him on your team for fantasy. You want pieces of that Chiefs offense, but I think mid-level RB2 is fair for him.
And, we keep thinking that, there's this idea in fantasy football that if you get the running back on a good offense, that's going to be a good running back. But the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs are kind of taking that away from us right now. Zach Moss, he has his games, but Devin Singletary, he's struggling over there. And with the Kansas City Chiefs, since Kareem Hunt, they haven't really produced an RB1. We see these guys that have flashes and they'll pop for good games. But if you're looking for weekly consistency, I don't think you're going to find that with any running back in Kansas City. So I agree with you. I think, kind of got a low end RB2 is the highest that I'd be willing to rate Marlon Mack. And that's with Clyde Edwards-Helaire out. So if they make this move for Marlon Mack, CEH is going to come back at some point, and then that pushes Marlon Mack into just complete obscurity, somebody you shouldn't even be thinking about starting in fantasy football. So, there's an opportunity that you can get yourself a solid RB2 for a few weeks if this trade does go through. But realistically, I mean, CEH is the guy to own here. And even there, he's just kind of a high-end RB2. I don't think that he really has the premium touches. He's not getting the targets. He's not getting the red zone work. And that cuts into what he does a little bit as a rusher. So, Marlon Mack, I'm happy to see him bounce back. Seeing him play on Monday, like I said, was just awesome. But I don't know if he's anything more than, a high-end RB3, low-end RB2.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to the next one then. We got another question coming in from Twitter. And this question is, what kind of value do you think the Panthers could get in return if they decided to trade Christian McCaffrey? So there were some buzzes in the offseason that they were thinking about possibly trading him. And now that he's injured, I don't know if there have been rumors. I haven't seen any rumors, but, we want to answer questions here. So they're asking if if CMC were to get traded, what type of haul would he get? What do you think, Troy?
So even though I think he could fetch a decent market, it's not like trading like a top tier quarterback, right? So I think that I just want to make that clear. Like, they're not going to get like multiple first, in my opinion, for CEH. For CMC. I think maybe a first. And I think a first at most. But I think it's probably like a second and some random picks, or maybe throwing in a players, most likely they'll probably like throw a player in and maybe multiple like random picks. I think that's probably what his value would be, but it's not like, again, not like the top tier. It's not like going to be like Deshaun Watson if he was traded, right? It wouldn't be that type of haul, right, even though CMC is amazing. So that's what I would think, right? Player and a few picks.
Now, this is going to sound just blasphemous for me to say, but I think that any running back on this Carolina team is going to be pretty serviceable. We saw last year when Christian McCaffrey went down, Mike Davis stepped up, and Mike Davis had a career season at 28 years old, and he looked like he rewound the clock, and he looked great. So I don't want to take anything away from Christian McCaffrey's talent, because he is one of the best running backs in the league. But you're not just trading Christian McCaffrey. This isn't fantasy football. You're trading Christian McCaffrey and a $64 million contract. And Christian McCaffrey, he through college and through his first few years in the NFL, he was just bulletproof. This guy didn't get hurt, but now this is 2 consecutive seasons where we have seen him struggling and battling with some injuries. So realistically, I don't know if he'd be able to get anything more than like a second or a third round pick, because you're taking on a contract that still has 4 years left on it. You're investing in a guy that has been injured for the last couple of years. And we just know from watching football, NFL general managers don't really value running backs all that much. Some of the best teams out there are just churning running backs that are on rookie contracts. So I don't think that there'd be any blockbuster trade. It would probably be one of those things where if he did get traded, like I said, probably like a second or a third round pick, and a lot of people would be scratching their heads wondering why. But there's some things to get worried about with Christian McCaffrey right now. I mean, so let's just stick on the topic of McCaffrey here. But Troy, I mean, is he somebody that you're thinking about in dynasty rankings, maybe starting to bump down a little bit from that number one overall spot because of some of these injury concerns over the last 2 years?
Man, the lowest I'd bump him maybe by 2, right? Because the
Yeah.
thing is, like, the thing with seeing with Christian McCaffrey, right, is like even injured, he gives you such an advantage during his healthy weeks. It's hard to just completely bump him down, right? Like again, he's in his tier of his own compared to any other running back, right? And like you make a case for like Saquon Barkley when he's fully healthy that he could do similar, but I still prefer Christian McCaffrey. But again, like I wouldn't bump him lower than 2 personally, but I understand that definitely the concern about maybe not having him at 1 because of injury concerns. But for me, he's still 1, but I can understand the worry about it.
Yeah, and really, I mean, there's question marks and red flags with all of those top running backs now. Christian McCaffrey, back-to-back years. Saquon Barkley hasn't been able to stay healthy. Dalvin Cook, knock on wood, has been pretty healthy this year, but I mean, not even. He's missed a couple of games too, and he's had those concerns. Last year was his healthy season, but it seems like there's red flags with all of the top running backs right now. So it used to just be crazy to take anybody besides Christian McCaffrey at 101. And now with what we're seeing, with the heavy usage and the injury concerns, I don't think it would be crazy to push him down, like you said, to like second or third overall. I saw a dynasty startup over at DLF recently where DeAndre Swift was the number one overall pick in a dynasty league. Few years younger than all these other guys that we're discussing, no injury concerns so far, still has that same pass catching upside and all that. So, I think that heading into next year, people might have a different view of Christian McCaffrey than they do this year. We got a much simpler question here next, coming in from Twitter at FFGrinder and simply asking, is Trey Sermon droppable? What do you think, Troy?
Absolutely, yes, he is droppable. Because here's the thing, right? With Trey Sermon, he showed us it said a lot what last game, right? This Sunday's game, because Elijah Mitchell's been injured for weeks. Trey Sermon had the opportunity to seize the job while Elijah Mitchell was hurt. But unfortunately, Trey Sermon was not impressive when he had the opportunity. The fact that Elijah Mitchell's first game back from injury, he was the workhorse, and Trey Sermon got one carry. That says everything you need to say. It's like unless Elijah Mitchell gets hurt again, he's just a handcuff. He's a handcuff and not that valuable of one, as we've seen. So to me, especially have a short bench, there's absolutely no reason you need to keep Trey Sermon on your roster.
Yeah, man. Like you said, one carry last week. He saw 2 total snaps, which was so disappointing to see. But the thing, even when Elijah Mitchell was out in weeks 3 and weeks 4, Trey Sermon wasn't getting the workhorse role that we usually see Kyle Shanahan backs get. In week 3, he saw 59% of the snaps. In week 4, he saw 51% of the snaps. Elijah Mitchell has seen 61% or more snaps in every single week, including 68%, which was his season high last year. So, yeah, I think you hit it on the head. Right now, Trey Sermon is a handcuff. And once Jeff Wilson Jr. comes back, which they're saying, sometime mid to late November, then Trey Sermon at that point is a handcuff. I don't even know if he's somebody worth rostering at all. But at this point, I think it's safe to drop Trey Sermon. He had 2 opportunities with the lead role in weeks 3 and weeks 4 and didn't look too great in them. He's not going to offer any sort of value in your starting lineup right now. So, yeah, I think unless you're in, a 20-man league with deep benches, drop Trey Sermon and go get to, Kadarius Toney or Devontae Booker or one of these other waiver wire guys, because Trey Sermon, he is not it this year. Also, want to remind before we go to this next question to start dropping those questions in the chat so we can get to those at the end of the show. But before that, let's go to a question from our good friend Jimbo Swenson, who's asking us, is Laviska Shenault a buy low? I'll let you talk about this because I've got a lot to say. So go ahead and talk about Laviska Shenault, Troy.
Sure. So last game was concerning because of his role change, right? Because the thing about it is from weeks 1 to 4, Laviska was playing out the slot, and that's when he was seeing the targets, right? Even though he wasn't producing, he was seeing the targets out of that slot role. But for some reason, bizarrely, they did a role change, right? Because unfortunately, DJ Chark is out. And again, he looked good on the one target one reception that he got. He looked phenomenal, but he didn't. That's the only thing he did on Sunday, which was unfortunate. And I expected, Laviska to be a lot more involved. And it seems like the Tavon Austin and Jamal Agnew show and Dan Arnold show. So I don't know how it's going to keep up. He's absolutely a buy low because right now people have to be worried about his role, and I don't know if he's going to stay in his role change. I think he is. I don't see Urban just putting him back in the slot, so I would be trying to buy him low for sure.
Yeah, and you want to talk about buy low? I was able to buy him for $3 of Fab off the waiver wire because he was dropped a couple weeks ago, or 2 weeks ago, and it's frustrating watching this Jaguars offense because we thought that DJ Chark was going to be somebody that we could rely on, and now unfortunately he's injured. Marvin Jones, it seemed like after week 1 he was going to be the wide receiver one on the team, but he's ceding snaps now. It's just it seems like it's an absolute mess in Jacksonville. So 5 weeks through the season now, they have had 4 different target leaders through those 5 weeks. The only guy that's led the team in targets twice is Marvin Jones, who did it in weeks 2 and weeks 3. But yeah, like you said, like all of these other guys are popping up now. Over the last 2 weeks, Tavon Austin has seen the same amount of targets as Laviska Shenault. So, you want to think that Laviska Shenault, this young guy that can kind of do it all and break tackles and take the ball out of the backfield, play out of the slot, play downfield. He's literally a gadget guy that can do everything, and they just aren't working him into the offense, which is really, really, really frustrating to see. So I think that he is a buy low just because you can get him for close to nothing. But I don't know if anybody is really going to step up and be the de facto wide receiver one on this team. It seems like every single week they go with somebody different. Like you called out last week, Sam Darnold led the team in targets, which was his second week on the team.
Dan
So,
Arnold.
or I'm sorry, Dan Arnold. Yes, Dan Arnold led the team in targets. So I guess the answer to the question is yes, but I don't think that your expectations for him should really be that high at this point. It's kind of crazy looking back to when you look at the drafts that we did. Somebody pointed this out on Twitter the other day, but Laviska Shenault and Mike Williams were back to back in ADP. You know how many people are kicking
Oof.
themselves right now for making that choice,
Oh
taking
my
Laviska Shenault
gosh.
instead of Mike Williams? Oh,
Look, based off Mike Williams' history, it wasn't no one was most people weren't predicting this kind of season. This is the season that everyone was been hoping for Mike Williams for like 5 years, and it's finally happening. So it's like if you believed still, if you were a truth and you held tight, you were rewarded, that's for
yeah.
sure.
And Mike Williams is, this is obviously his breakout year, but when you look at his full, what he's done so far, he had a 10 touchdown season already. He's had a 1,000-yard season already. And neither of those are really breakouts, but he's shown flashes. I'm stoked as a Mike Williams fan to see him finally putting it together. Hope this man can stay healthy and just do what we've wanted him to do since he got drafted, which is just ball out as the team's wide receiver one. The next question that we got is coming in from William Campbell, and he is saying, should we start ranking Kyle Pitts as an elite tight end after last week? So, elite is kind of a broad term, but when I think elite, I just think of that top tier, which is, Travis Kelce, Darren Waller, TJ Hawkinson. Are we putting Kyle Pitts in that discussion now?
I think he's right there. I think he should be top 5. I mean, that's where he should be, right? Like, I feel like we finally saw him put together everything that we have been hoping for, right? And it's not just because Calvin Ridley's out. I know that's been kind of the topic. Obviously, did it have an impact? Absolutely. Calvin Ridley being in the lineup. Yeah, Pitts is going to be a number one option. But at the same time, Pitts has been heavily involved in this offense, since the beginning, right? He's the second in target share in the offense. He's getting consistent targets. He's running consistent routes. The only thing about it, though, and this is obviously for redraft purposes, is that he just, for some reason, Matt Ryan, he was struggling with not just Pitts, but Calvin Ridley too. Just his offense hasn't been as in sync as we were hoping. And again, last game, hopefully, this is more of a sign to come. But I think he's at least top 5. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished the season top 3. And yeah, I'm very confident in him going forward. Dynasty, obviously, he's, his value after last game is you're gonna have to again throw in your firstborn if you want Kyle Pitts in a dynasty trade.
Yeah, man, I've seen some takes out there saying that Kyle Pitts should be the overall number 1 pick in dynasty startups right now. And, it's spicy, but I mean, really, like if you're going to be getting a guy that's going to be putting up Travis Kelce like numbers for the next 10 to 12 years, isn't that exactly what you want? I mean, so yeah, but what you said, rank him as a top 5 and expect him to finish in the top 3. That's exactly where my mind went when I was reading this question. And I think that, if you're ranking him outside of the top 5, it's crazy at this point. Last week was fun for him because it was a solo game where, it wasn't getting muddled up with all the other games in the afternoon. So everybody got to watch that game and saw his breakout. And it wasn't him just, putting up points. It was him running over defenders, making tough catches, and showing off that speed. And I mean, he looks like a freak out there on the field. He is so much bigger and faster than everybody else. So yeah, I think that you got to start ranking him in the top 5 every single week. And like you alluded to, the usage was there. He wasn't able to find the end zone. He wasn't scoring touchdowns, but the targets were there. The target share was there. The usage was there. And he finally put it all together in a big performance last week. So I'm thrilled to see that. I'm glad that Kyle Pitts is starting to ball out now. And I think that you should value him as an elite tight end. Got another question in here from our friend FF Grinder. He's saying in a PPR league, Diggs has been pretty disappointing. Obviously, I actually released a video on the Footballguys YouTube page about that this morning that you can go check out. But what he's asking is, would you try and trade him now for either Antonio Brown or CeeDee Lamb? What do you think, Troy? Are you ready to sell low and get Antonio Brown or CeeDee for Diggs?
No, I not Antonio Brown. CeeDee, you can make an argument, but the problem is that no, I think I'd rather have Diggs. It's to me, it also you can throw Calvin really into this discussion, right? In terms of him and Diggs have been pretty disappointing. I kind of think of them equally, right? But I wouldn't sell any of them right now. I believe that it's going to get better. One of the reasons why Diggs has been so disappointing is the emergence of Emmanuel Sanders and Dawson Knox. They've been way more involved in the offense than anyone was expecting, and it's obviously hurting Diggs. But to me, Diggs in that offense, he's still getting the highest target share in that offense. And I think we're going to see, maybe we're not going to see consistent games like we did last year, because again, he was getting absurd targets. But Antonio Brown, I've said this before, he could either be the number 1 receiver on the team or he could be the number 3, depending on the game. So he's a little bit unpredictable. CeeDee, in a way, he's kind of similar. Like Dalton Schultz, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was out targeting CeeDee, and Dalton Schultz has been hurting CeeDee and Amari Cooper. So he has a similar problem, right? So for me, I'd rather have Diggs. I get the question because, again, it must be frustrating because you're expecting Diggs to be Devontae Adams, right? Or the way Cooper Kupp is, you were expecting that from Diggs, and unfortunately, you haven't gotten it. But I still would I would hold on to Diggs right now.
Yeah, so like I said, I just did a pretty deep dive on Stefon Diggs, and what I wanted to go into this was just to state the obvious when I started doing this dive on Stefon Diggs and say, hey, he's a screaming buy low, go out and get him. And once I started to look at the numbers, I think I kind of changed my tune a little bit. I think he's somebody that, if you can get him for super cheap, I think that you should go out and do that. But I think that we need to temper our expectations a little bit for Stefon Diggs. Footballguys, we actually had him ranked as the overall wide receiver 1 with our consensus rankings heading into the season. We had him ahead of Tyreek Hill and ahead of Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Right. And right now he's not living up to that. And I don't think that there's any way that he really finishes as a top 3 receiver at this point. And that's no knock on Diggs. He's still seeing targets and he's still a great player, but really Dawson Knox has emerged as a very legitimate threat in Buffalo. And that's something that we should not ignore whatsoever. He has tripled his target share from last year. In addition to Dawson Knox really stepping up, Emmanuel Sanders, who was the replacement for John Brown, is seeing almost or over double the target share that John Brown saw last year. So you got not only Dawson Knox stepping up, Emmanuel Sanders stepping up, Cole Beasley has seen more targets per game than he saw last year. All of that works against Stefon Diggs. So he's still a guy that you're plugging in every single week as a wide receiver 1. You weren't even thinking twice about, benching him or anything like that. But I think that you should start to value him as more of like a top 10 to 12 guy rather than a top 3 guy like we wanted him to be in the offseason. But to answer the question, Antonio Brown, CeeDee Lamb, no, I'm not trading away Stefon Diggs for either of those. And basically the conclusion that I came to is if you can get a top 10 running back or if you can get Travis Kelce or Darren Waller, you trade Stefon Diggs, but outside of that, you just hold him and keep plugging him in as your wide receiver 1 every single week.
Agreed.
Next question is in here from our friend Abe at DFS Docket on Twitter, and he is saying, and this is a question for you, Troy, what am I supposed to do with Myles Gaskin?
So Myles Gaskin, for those who don't know, I'm a Dolphins fan, but man, Myles Gaskin. So let me break down to you what happened. So in week 4, he saw 2 carries, no receptions, 0 targets. This past week, he got 10 receptions on 10 targets. And he had 2 receiving touchdowns. He set career highs in targets and receptions. And he was the RB2, I think, on the week, right? It's just you rarely see like that night and day in 1 week type of thing. And it was bizarre. Like I have no idea still what his usage was, like why he barely got any carries. Game script could have been a factor, but at the same time, it was still a bizarre usage, right? Because for the season, he's been playing over like I believe like 55% of snaps for on average outside of week 4. And he's been getting like a decent amount of targets every single week outside of week 4. So I think both of them were really extremes, right? Week 4 was way too low, and this past week was way too high. So I think somewhere in the middle is where Gaskin is going to live. And you have to start it. You can't see that game last week and not play him because you can't afford, just in case he happens to have a huge game
Right.
again, to have him on your bench, right? That hurt because nobody was starting him after his performance. So I think he's a good low in RB2 flex play for the time being. But yeah, you're playing him. I believe that he plays Jacksonville. So you're going to want to play him this week.
And you know what I was hoping, because I had this question. This was like the first thing that popped into my mind Monday morning. I was like, what are we supposed to do with Myles Gaskin? And then I'm glad Abe asked us a question because we get to talk about it. But I thought, there's got to be some trend. So I went through every single Dolphins game and was looking at the win probability and looking at the game script to see how that affected Myles Gaskin. And there seems to be no correlation whatsoever. Like I cannot for the life of me figure out when he's going to get touches and when he's not going to get touches. So I kind of have him lumped in with like Nyheim Hines and JD McKissick, where he's a very capable pass catcher, but he's never going to get that early down work with Malcolm Brown there. So you got to have to look at, when are the games that they're going to be throwing to running backs. And that's a lot easier said than done, because we've also seen this with Nyheim Hines, who has these huge weeks where he's racking up a ton of catches, scoring touchdowns. Then we have other weeks where he hardly sees any snaps at all. And, he had the 1 week where he fumbled on one touch and didn't see the field for the rest of the game. So that's kind of what you got to expect with Myles Gaskin, too. Really high floor, really low ceiling. And that makes him a pretty tough player to stomach. So asking what you're supposed to do with him, if you've got him on your roster right now, I think you try to sell him. Like, I think this is an opportunity right now just to sell high after a huge game and avoid the headache. But something I talked about a lot in the offseason, and Lauren Carpenter and I actually on our show with Football Guys, 2 Point Stance, we talked about this a lot, is that Malcolm Brown is one of those guys that coaches love. Fantasy players hate him. Coaches love him. He does all of the little things. He picks up his blocks. He doesn't fumble the ball, and that is going to keep him on the field and keep getting him opportunities. And it's frustrating, if you're rostering Myles Gaskin right now. But I think the best thing to do is just try to sell high after this, and if not, just roll the dice, plug him in as a flex, and hope that he has those boom games every now and then.
That's all you can do at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get on to the next one. Crumb's Revenge asked us a question: who is a better bench stash, Kenny Golladay or Jerry Jeudy? These are two guys that are injured right now. Who would you prefer to stash on your bench?
I much prefer Jerry Jeudy because we've seen Kenny Galladay. He's been banged up. We've seen him in the offense, and he's just not involved. I don't know if because he's been dealing with lingering injuries. I don't know what it is, but he was brought in. They paid him a lot of money to be the alpha. He has not once looked like the alpha, right? Sterling Shepard, when he's healthy, he's the alpha, and nobody
Mhm.
was expecting that, right? So I think it's a scenario where I much rather Jerry Jeudy because at least with Jerry Jeudy, he has the ability. I think Cole Sutton's still the one, but at least Jerry Jeudy has the ability to be the 1A. And Teddy Bridgewater has a higher A dot, I believe, than he's had in his whole career. I think he's setting a career
Ever.
high this year at A dot. So that's really exciting. And then look, Jerry Jeudy, he's just younger, he's talented. And I just think that once he gets to that offense, I think he's going to be immediately involved. And also, they just lost KJ Hamler. They only have so many people to throw, the ball to. I know they have Tim Patrick and they have Noah Fant, but to me, I think Jerry Judy's the guy that I'm much more excited to stash.
Hey, and you're not even mentioning my boy Albert O. He's been out there putting up some pretty solid
Yeah.
numbers this year too. But I'm with you. I agree 100%. Jerry Jeudy is the guy that you want to be stashing on your bench. I think that his upside is so much higher, and it's frustrating as fantasy managers, and if you're a New York Giants fan, to see what Kenny Golladay is doing. He has not looked good at all. A lot of people were concerned that it was, attitude and work ethic issues when he was in Detroit. And now he shows up into New York and is having some similar rumors and buzz getting spread about him. So I think that Jerry Jeudy, like you said, he's a young guy. He looked really, really good last year. He's got an opportunity to take over as the, maybe not the wide receiver one with Cortland Sutton there, but kind of the wide receiver 1A. He's going to see a lot of work. I think Kenny Golladay, if he's out there with a fully healthy team, he's going to be behind Saquon Barkley, Sterling Shepard, and honestly, with what we've seen from Kadarius Toney, he's probably going to be behind Kadarius Toney in the pecking order too. So Jerry Judy's the guy that I'd be stashing here. Got a question from ZachTat13 on Twitter, and he's saying, who is the most valuable handcuff running back? Benny Sell, Stoney Michel, Malcolm Brown, or Kenneth Gainwell? I know who I'm going with. This is a pretty easy one for me, but I want to see your take, Troy. Who are you picking out of these four to stash on your bench?
Oh, this is very easy for me too. It's Sony Michel. To me, I'm like, to me, it's not even close. All right, so Benny Snell, and I get the Benny. The only reason I would see semi-interested in Benny Snell is just because how the Steelers use their running backs. They like to use a workhorse running back, but we've seen, I think it was last year, they didn't necessarily use Snell in the back like a workhorse role. I think they mixed in McFarland, who is on IR now, so I don't know what they'll do in terms of how they would utilize him. But we've seen a little bit of glimpse of Sony Michel from last game. He looked pretty good. He looks good in that offense, right? Any running back in the Rams offense, it's not just that they're going to get the work, but they consistently see goal line opportunities. And that's what we like to see, right? Kenny Gainwell, because I just look at Miles Sanders. Miles Sanders has done nothing this season. So for me, if Kenny Gainwell just gets that, starting job, he's going to just do nothing in that role. Malcolm Brown, we know the Dolphins are not good at running. They're towards the bottom rushing team. And Malcolm Brown, again, we've seen him get the opportunity. He hasn't done anything. So to me, it's very easy. I'm going Sony Michel.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with you here, but I do just want to call out that Kenny Gainwell is one of the handcuffs that I love to have, especially now when we're looking at bye weeks and injuries midseason, because Kenny Gainwell is a guy that you can kind of plug in weekly as a flex play during bye weeks because of his pass catching upside. So the problem with the Eagles is I don't think that they're ever really going to commit to a workhorse running back. We've seen this for the last few years now, where they just prefer to go with the committee approach, and I think that's what you're going to get out of Philadelphia. But I'm with you that Sony Michel has the highest upside. If something happens to Darrell Henderson, I don't think Jake Funk is going to come in there and suddenly start seeing a huge chunk of work. So it's going to be Sony Michel, probably seeing 20 to 25 touches a game, just like we're seeing from Darrell Henderson right now. So of this bunch right here, out of these four guys, I'm with you as well, Sony Michel. But don't forget about Kenny Gainwell.
Yeah, I will say we can't go. There's a different coaching staff though. There's different coaching staff, but they seem to be implementing the same philosophy though of using multiple backs. And it's frustrating. I thought Boston Scott was going to be a thing this year, and clearly I was wrong. But yeah, Kenny Gainwell, he didn't have a good game last week, but we have seen him, like you said, involved in the passing game. So yeah, that would be semi-interesting, but to me, not as interesting as so.
Yeah, speaking of Boston Scott, right before week one of the Scott Fish Bowl, I really wanted some Boston Scott. So the day waivers opened up, I dropped my last round pick for Boston Scott. You know who my last round pick was? Elijah Mitchell. I dropped Elijah Mitchell for Boston Scott before the season started. So sometimes you got to trust the process and just stick with the guys you draft rather than making those moves, because I am kicking myself for that one.
Look, man, you got to take risks. Fantasy football is all about risk, man. It could have hit it, but obviously it didn't hit. So.
It did not. All right, we got 2 questions left, and then we will get to the chat. So start dropping those in the chat if you if you have any questions for us, and we'll get to those in just a few minutes. This one's coming in from Twitter. Sylvie_76 is saying, does Chuba Hubbard or Alex Collins have more value for the rest of the season? I think there's a couple ways that you can take this. If you're looking at weekly value, or if you're looking at upside for a handcuff. But Troy, who would you prefer here, Chuba Hubbard or Alex Collins?
Chuba. I think I'm going to go Chuba because, again, I'm not going to say that what Christian McCaffrey's dealing with is just like last year, but we saw last year he got hurt, he came back, and he got hurt, and we didn't see him. So now we see him getting hurt the first time, and then look, hamstrings, they're tricky, and you just never know what's going to happen with them. Soft tissues injuries, they're nothing to mess with, right? So Chuba, and we saw he's getting the work. He's getting the opportunity. Alex Collins,
he's no Mike Davis. But.
He's no Mike Davis. But Alex Collins, and also the thing about Chuba is that he's getting the rushing work, and he'll be getting targets. Alex Collins, and the problem is now also with Russell Wilson's hurt. We don't know how long Russell Wilson's going to be out for, right? So with Geno, I'm less confident in Alex Collins, but I think he's very great game script dependent, right? If they're up, then I think Alex Collins is very, enticing. But when they're down, we've seen them, mix in DJ Dallas, Travis Homer. So he's less sure of a thing if he gets the opportunity. So I'm gonna go Chuba.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think that Chuba, it hasn't really turned into fantasy points yet, but he is going to get the work with McCaffrey out. And but the difference is Alex Collins. I think that I was all in on Chris Carson this offseason, but I think that they're trying to protect him a little bit because of these injuries that he's dealing with. So I think that Alex Collins is somebody that could be a weekly flex play even with Chris Carson healthy. I think that that's going to be kind of a frustrating timeshare committee through the rest of the season. But with Chuba Hubbard, like you said, he's getting the work. And the thing is, once McCaffrey comes back, Chuba Hubbard is going to be he's going to have no value whatsoever. I remember last year, Mike Davis was balling out, and then Christian McCaffrey came back, and everyone was like, well, Mike Davis has been playing so well. He's going to have to carve into that workload a little bit, right? Well, he didn't. We saw McCaffrey just come in and be an every down back again. And that's what's going to happen when he's healthy. And you got to expect that with Chuba Hubbard. But if you're looking for a pure upside play, Chuba Hubbard has a much higher ceiling. But if you're looking for somebody that you can play week in and week out, kind of like we were talking about with Kenny Gainwell in the last question, I think Alex Collins is somebody that you can flex during bye weeks if you're getting a little bit desperate. All right, we got a few questions in the chat. We will get to those after this one. The last question we have is coming in from Twitter. At Wayne of Steel is saying Cortland Sutton, Michael Pittman, Emmanuel Sanders, Jalen Waddle, or Kadarius Toney. I assume this is a start-sit question for the week. Who are you starting out of this bunch? This is a tough one.
I'm gonna lie of it. I don't have the matchups right in front of me, but I'll say just based off the players, I think I kind of like Sutton. I think I'm either gonna go Sutton.
Raiders this week. That's the Broncos are the Raiders this week.
Yeah, I like that. I'm gonna go Sutton then.
Yeah, and I'm with you. And I don't want to get too deep into everything that happened with John Gruden, but I think that the Raiders are going to have a pretty tough week with a new head coach and everything going on and players taking practice off. So I think that Denver is going to be set up for a pretty big week. And I'd go with Sutton here, but man, Kadarius Toney, like what are we supposed to do about this guy? He looked phenomenal. Like I hate making the comp to Odell Beckham because Odell Beckham was, in his prime, one of the best receivers we've ever seen. But seeing a guy with his build doing the things that he was doing in a New York Giants uniform, that's all I could think about was a young Odell Beckham.
So here's the thing about look, if the Giants are smart, they will get him the ball as much as possible. I am a little bit worried if everybody's healthy, if Kenny Galladay's healthy, if Darius Slayton's healthy, and Sterling Shepard. How much opportunity could Kadarius Toney have? As what we've seen, he should at least be the number 2 option, right? Sterling Shepard, when he was healthy, he was great.
Yeah,
he was really, really good, this season, right? So I don't want people just forgetting about how good he looked on the field. So I think when he comes back, and I think he might actually be coming back this week, if I read the reports correctly.
Practiced today. Him and Slayton both practiced today after missing last week.
Yeah, so see, to me, like, look, Slayton, we've seen enough of Slayton in terms of like he'll be a good number 3, but Kadarius Toney shouldn't be playing over him. Look, I'm not gonna pretend like I know more than NFL coaches, but just from the eyeball test, Kadarius Toney looks electric. You just need to find ways to get the ball in his hands, and yeah, so I'm excited about it, especially for Dynasty. I'm very, very excited for Dynasty, but in terms of redraft, I would just, again, like with everyone healthy, it might be a little bit more difficult to see consistent targets, but we'll see what happens though.
Yeah. And then I also just want to shout out Michael Pittman. He finally had a big game, and that was on Monday night, so a lot of people got to see it. But that man, he is just built to be a wide receiver one. He's got that big, long frame, the long strides. He's strong. He kind of does it all. So he had a disappointing season last year because he was dealing with some injuries as a rookie, and it's pretty tough to bounce back from injuries when you're missing early in the season. But I'm really excited about him. But looking at the matchups this week, I think we're both in agreement that out of these 5, you're starting Cortland Sutton this week.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
All right. Why don't you go ahead and let everybody know a little bit about the email update, and I'll start combing through the chat for some questions.
Of course. Well, if you listen to this show, man, you need to sign up for the Football Guys daily email update if you aren't already. Every day, Joe Bryant will bring you all the latest from Football Guys, news, transactions, rumors, all the articles, shows from Football Guys staff. So make sure that you sign up today.
Absolutely. I've been on that email list since high school. It's such a great way to start the day. Just, if there's one thing that you're going to read, like if you want to play fantasy football and you don't want to invest a ton of time into it, just sign up for that email update. That's really all you need. But let's go ahead and start going through the chat. And now we are streaming to Twitch and Facebook and all over the place. So we got more questions coming in from everywhere. Let's start with this one coming in from Jay Miller on Facebook. He's saying, is Kyle Pitts above Travis Kelce?
So here's the thing. We got to talk about this, redraft and dynasty, right?
Dynasty? All right. Dynasty, we got a conversation. All right. Let's put on our dynasty cats and talk a little dynasty here.
Right. Because Dave and I in agreement, redraft, no, he's not above it. But dynasty, to be honest, yes. It'd be going into the season, I was more resistant to that idea. I know Kelsey's older and Pitt's hype was insane, but I'm sorry. Like, look, he's going to be the new Kelsey. His health, as long as he's healthy, he's going to be the new Kelsey, right? We've seen a glimpse of it, but we already know how the Falcons want to use him. He's going to be the number 2 option. I don't see them getting, another Julio Jones anytime soon. So it's going to be him and Calvin Ridley for the foreseeable future. So to me, yeah, you want that tight end, a young tight end who's just going to be a target hog, especially if you're in a tight end premium league. Oh my gosh, that'd be beautiful. So yeah, Pitts over Kelsey in dynasty.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. And I was kind of a Kyle Pitts hater in the offseason just because historically we don't see tight ends come in and do what he's doing right now. And I think the one kind of anomaly over the last few decades was Evan Ingram. And Evan Ingram was able to do that because he took so many of his snaps out wide and out of the slot. And we're seeing that a lot with Kyle Pitts right now. So, he still has the designation of tight end, but he is really living up to, what they said in the offseason, that he was going to be playing all over the field, that he'd be more of a receiver than a tight end. That's exactly what we're seeing right now. So, in Dynasty, I'm putting Kyle Pitts comfortably ahead of Travis Kelce. There's an 11-year age difference. Travis Kelce's 32 years old. Kyle Pitts is 21. That is crazy to think about, that the two best guys at their position right now in Dynasty are that wide apart in age. Let's go over here. We got a question coming in from Twitch, and they are asking, what should I do? I just received a trade offer, Calvin Ridley for Terry McLaurin in half PPR. Are you giving up Calvin Ridley for Terry McLaurin?
Oh, man. This is actually, I will say I'd rather have Calvin Ridley. I think I'd rather have Calvin Ridley. It's very close. And I get it, but to me, Calvin Ridley is still better. So I'm gonna go Calvin Ridley.
Oh man, I'm gonna disagree with you on this one. And
Wow.
Calvin Ridley, what we're seeing right now, I think that he is being supplanted by Kyle Pitts as the wide receiver 1 there, even though Kyle Pitts is technically a tight end. I think that he is going to take over. I think that he's just a better all-around player. You've also got the emergence of Courtland Sutton, which we can't ignore at this point. His snap counts are going up. He's lining up as a wide receiver. So I like Calvin Ridley, but right now, when you look at the Washington football team roster, that team runs through that offense runs through Terry McLaurin, and he is just taking a huge step up this year. He's looking absolutely fantastic. So this is a really, really tough question. In my rest of season rankings, I have them right next to each other, but I'm giving the slight edge to Terry McLaurin here.
It's a very, very fair trade. It's pretty even, but it's just like I'm expecting Calvin Ridley to bounce back. Look, because the thing about it, he's definitely getting between
it's like almost 10 targets a game.
Yeah, exactly. Like 9, like between 9 and 10 targets a game. So I'm like, the problem is Matt Ryan's just not hitting them. If we just hit him on these targets, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, in my opinion.
Another big thing, and I don't want to make this comp lightly, but remember when Juju Smith-Schuster, people were talking about him as the overall dynasty wide receiver 1. He was balling out when he had Antonio Brown on the opposite side of the field, and then Antonio Brown left, and Juju just kind of faded into irrelevance. Do you think that might kind of be happening here with Calvin Ridley not having Julio Jones to take away the pressure?
No, because I think what it is, because I don't think it's Calvin Ridley's fault. Like, I feel like when you watch some of the games, right, it's like you just watch Juju. Yeah, because the time, like, I feel like when Juju was the guy, it's like he was getting the targets, but like he was getting well defended, or like it wasn't like all like Big Ben. It was kind of Big Ben, but it wasn't all him. Like now when I'm watching it, I'm just frustrated. I'm like, Matt Ryan's just not hitting him. If he just hits him, then we wouldn't be having this conversation. It'd be okay, Calvin Ridley's still Calvin Ridley. And I think it's too early. And I get the discussion in terms of the GG comparison because it's looking like that. But I'm like, again, it's not Calvin Ridley's fault. It's Matt Ryan's fault. So Matt Ryan's guys, or maybe it's the offensive scheme. I don't know what it is, but they need to figure that out because y'all
Yeah.
ruining my Calvin Ridley shares.
And this is one of those trades that's really fair at the time right now when we're looking at it. But by the end of the season, there's probably going to be a pretty clear winner and a pretty clear loser
Yeah,
of this trade. And you're going to be kicking yourself if you're the one that accepted the trade and it comes back to bite you.
exactly.
All right, we got another question in from YouTube here. Steve F is asking us, who is a better player to keep for this season and Dynasty, Mike Thomas or Jerry Jeudy? Whoo,
Okay. So,
Mike Thomas, man, that's a polarizing one. Everybody's got a different take on him. But who are you keeping here, Troy?
this season, Jerry Judy. Jerry Judy this season. And for Dynasty, my goodness. I think I might go Jerry Judy in Dynasty too. I think it might be both. Like the problem is with Mike, we just haven't seen Mike Thomas of old in so long, and I think that's also part of this because I don't know how he's gonna look with Jameis. I don't know who's gonna be the quarterback for them next year. And obviously, Broncos the same way, but I just think Jerry Judy has such a promising future. Mike Thomas is still great, but I think Mike Thomas is not going to be on the Saints. I have no idea what his situation is going to be. He's going to be so up in the air, and I think I'm going Jerry Judy, and also because the age factor too.
Yeah, man, this is a good question, but I'm gonna agree with you and go with Jerry Jeudy here, just because Mike Thomas. I mean, it's just not looking good. 2019, he just shattered records and looked like one of the best wide receivers we'd ever seen. And since then, I don't know if it's that he just can't get his head on straight or what is going on, but it has just been one issue after another with Mike Thomas ever since he got that paycheck. So. Yeah, Jerry Jeudy being a little bit younger, showing some really good flashes in his rookie season. I would lean ever so slightly towards Jerry Jeudy in this one. And we could have egg on our face in a few weeks when Mike Thomas comes back, and if he looks like the Mike Thomas of old. But I'm gonna lean towards Jerry Jeudy here, and I hope I'm not getting blinded by recency bias, but that would be my choice. That's a tough one though. Got a few more questions here, and this one comes in from Joey. Should I start Stafford versus the New York Giants or Kyler Murray versus Cleveland? Kyler Murray, his shoulder is bothering him again, the same issue that bothered him last year. Who are you going with?
I gotta go Kyler. Like I was look, Matt Stafford, he's great. He has, what he's doing is awesome, but anytime, look, Kyler's one of them people that I don't care. Look, he's just too amazing. And again, like whether he's running, throwing the ball, it's Kyler. It's Kyler. Look, shout out to Stafford, but it's
Yeah,
Kyler for me.
yeah. We can move on to the next question. Don't ever
Yeah.
bench Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
Don't bench Kyler Murray. I mean,
Agreed.
he's an absolute stud.
Yeah.
I understand being a little bit worried about Cleveland's defense and that pass rush that they've got, but
Nah.
we have seen Kyler Murray just putting defenders on skates all season. Like it's just you almost expect it at this point. Like he is almost untouchable back there.
He's
So
only leaving my lineup if it's a buy. That's it.
this is a fun question. Rita from Twitter is asking us, which Tampa Bay wide receiver do you want going forward? Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown. Who's the guy to roster? I don't know. You tell me, Troy. I have no idea.
I'll be honest saying I don't know if I had to pick, I'll do Mike Evans because I feel like no matter what Mike Evans has, I think besides like week 1, Mike Evans has been fairly involved. And I think also Brady looks to him in like the red zone, right? And I feel like,
Mhm.
I think Chris Godwin, I think he has maybe a couple touchdowns. I don't know how many touchdowns he has offhand, but Chris Godwin seems like, between the 20s kind of guy, but like he's like the possession kind of receiver. AB has the big plays. I think Mike Evans does everything, right? They look for him in the red zone. They look for him in big plays. He can also look for him for third down. So to me, I like Mike Evans just because I think he's the best combination of all of them, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a tough question because they're
Yeah.
all such different receivers and they have such different roles. And Man, like part of me wants to lean towards Antonio Brown. He had that injury, but when he's played, Tom Brady just fixates on him, man. Like they have something special. They got that connection there between the two veterans.
Mike Evans had a really good game last week too. I know what
I
Abe
know.
did, but Mike Evans balled out too now.
I know. And Chris Godwin's had some good games in here
He
too. It's
has.
crazy to think that Chris Godwin is like the wide receiver 3 on anybody's team. Like you put Chris Godwin on almost any team in the league and he is the wide receiver 1 there. And yeah, it's just crazy this trio that they've got in Tampa Bay, but I'm gonna go with you, Troy. As much as I love AB and as much as I was, pumping him up in the offseason, given the target share that Mike Williams gets when they're, not even in the red zone, like at the goal line, they'll be at the 1 yard line, and Brady will drop back and try to get the ball to Mike Evans. So I'm gonna go with Mike Evans out of this trio. We got a trade question here, and this is a long one, but stick with me, Troy. Full PPR. I traded Amari Cooper for Cordero Patterson. Wide receivers are Tyreek Hill, Deontay Johnson, Corey Davis, and Kadarius Toney. Running backs are Najee, Michael Carter, Javante, and Damian Harris. Do you think this is a win or a loss, giving up Amari Cooper for Cordero Patterson?
I'm sorry to tell you this, BB. That's a huge L in my book.
Yeah.
Like again, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to get on you too much, but and I think the problem is the recency bias, right? The thing about Cordell Patterson, and like I've gotten questions like, oh, should I trade Dalvin Cook for Cordell? And what Cordell's doing is very, very impressive. And the problem is though, is that he's not playing enough snaps, and what he's doing is not sustainable unless he's gets to play more snaps. He's only playing like 33% of snaps. So he's barely on the field. He's just been extremely efficient. Whether those other guys are always on the field and they're more involved and they're consistently are going to be seeing a higher target share. So I think that's the difference, right? Like it's hard. And again, when Calvin Ridley and you see Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts start, actually Matt Ryan starts actually hitting him, I think we're going to see less production from Cordell Patterson. So unfortunately, look, it's an L. I get it because look, he's been balling out. I understand the excitement, but if I'm being honest, it's an L. But it's all right. It's okay. We're gonna make it through this.
Yeah, and I will say what's really nice about Cordero Patterson, I feel like you got to bump his value up just a little bit if you're playing on Sleeper or Yahoo where he has the dual eligibility, because that is just so nice, especially
It
in
is.
bye weeks. Like you're missing a running back, you're missing a wide receiver, it doesn't matter. Just plug in Cordero Patterson and hope for the best. But last week we actually saw his snap counts go up dramatically. He was floating around that like 33% to start the season, and then last week he saw 59% of the snaps, which was way higher than we've seen. But when he doesn't find the end zone, that he's not really putting up great numbers. I think in half PPR he put up like 15, 16 points last week, but his early season production was so heavily weighed by an insane touchdown rate. And then the other thing is Amari Cooper, he's been injured. He's dealing with an ankle injury, so I don't think that we've seen the full Amari Cooper yet. So I'm gonna agree with you, Troy. This is a tough one, and you know what? That's what it's about, though, is taking risks. Hopefully, this pays off for you. But right now, if you're asking me, I'd prefer Amari Cooper over Cordero Patterson. Let's see if we got any other questions here. All right, we got one more. This is coming from John Zangaro on YouTube, and he's saying, should I trade Jonathan Taylor and Robert Woods for Alvin Kamara? I have Stefon Diggs, Devontae Adams, Hollywood Brown, Darrell Henderson, and Joe Mixon. So are you giving up Jonathan Taylor and Robert Woods to get Alvin Kamara?
No, I'd rather keep Jonathan Taylor and Robert Woods. And look, I love Kamara, but the issue is that we're not seeing him as involved as a passing game as we've seen him in years past. So to me, Kamara and JT are like the same level. So you're pretty much trading running backs at the same level, and you're throwing in a good wide receiver who just came off of the squeaky wheel game where he was targeted insanely. No, it's an overpay. You might as well just keep Jonathan Taylor and Robert Woods and just ride with that.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I'm sticking to as is with Jonathan Taylor and Robert Woods. We got Jeff Bell popping in here saying, I pop on and I hear Troy trashing Patterson again.
Again, I don't
Every single time, man.
that's hilarious because I love Patterson, man. But like, look, Jeff, I'm right, bro. I gotta talk to him. I'm gonna ask Jeff after this about what if he would do that.
Yeah, and I love him too. Being a Bears fan, Cordero Patterson, we had some bad, dark years as Bears fans, but Cordero Patterson brought the fun. I mean, like, he wasn't putting up numbers. He wasn't doing anything crazy when he was in Chicago, but just he was so much fun. You could tell the team loved him, the coaches loved him, the fans loved him. So seeing him break out at 30 years old and having one of the best seasons of his career, I absolutely love to see it, man. Cordero Patterson, wishing him all of the best. Troy, before we sign off here, why don't you go ahead and let everyone know why they need a Football Guys premium membership?
Of course. Well, if you're into shows like this, you're probably a serious fantasy player. You need to get a Football Guys premium membership. Whether you're playing redraft, dynasty, DFS, we've got you covered. Go to footballguys.com and click the orange button in the upper right-hand corner to sign up. We'll do the work while you do the winning.
Absolutely. Thank you to everybody that tuned in for another episode of Football Guys' newest show, the Football Guys Mailbag Show. We come at you every single Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We will be back next week at 7:30 p.m. Eastern with our friend Victoria. We'll have the trio back together here. Be sure to send those questions into mailbag@footballguys.com, or you can just hit me and Troy up on Twitter. We'll get those to you, but we will see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.